I don't know. I have contention with your personal rankings on those. I don't think you're being true to yourselves. There's no way if this album came out this year, Jason would give it 3.5. Just absolutely no way.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Taste Like Music. Jason, Joe, and Crams are here. It is another listography week. We were slacking a little with Bjork. We put it off and put it off. So normally we go every other week with the listographies. We're going back to back, baby, to make it up to you. This is another Patreon full winner. We're doing Sade this week. I guess someone told us online that the correct pronunciation is Sade, but I will not be saying that. I will be saying Sade for the entire
It's
video.
got to be one of those like French things like Sade, Sade. Like you don't really say the R. There's no way you say Sade. It's Sade.
If they want to tell us how to talk, they should have won the war in the 1780s. I don't know what to tell you. Got to get over it.
1770s, right?
No, the treaty was signed in 83.
Okay.
Battle of Yorktown. Come on.
We've got 6 records to rank. Pretty long career, not that many albums, really spaced them out. So I have very little experience with Sade. I actually had a couple songs of theirs in my songs of the year list, but only on the Billboard side and only due to abysmal years, very weak competition. They were able to crack my top 5, I think twice, maybe only once. But I really only know a handful of songs, never did a full album listen. So this was mostly all new for me. How about you guys?
Brand new. The only thing I think I've maybe mentioned before, and I could be wrong, is how much I hate Smooth Operator. Like, didn't even know had albums. Thought it was just like Smooth Operator and nothing else. So this is, totally ignorant going into this.
Yeah, I need Smooth Operator, and maybe I'm sure I've heard one of his other songs somewhere in my lifetime, possibly on like one of those Smooth Quiet Storm CDs that they used to hawk late night television. But other than that, I mean, I couldn't remember. None of these songs rang a bell at all when we were going through, other than the very first song and the very first album.
Okay, so I think this discography is pretty clear cut, just the 6 core studio albums. We'll go one by one the whole way through. Who's starting off?
My number 6, my least favorite album by Sade is the debut. Diamond Life was really bummed out that it wasn't about baseball players. I don't like Smooth Operator at all. I think it's so corny. I don't think her voice is alluring. The smoothness of everything is really friggin' lame. I just don't dig it. I don't find it sexy. I think it's like this wannabes 80s highbrow kind of sexuality nonsense where like you're alone in an apartment with a little bit of red wine and a high rise and the west side of Manhattan. It's really stupid. Her voice is grainy and kind of ugly, like chunky peanut butter. I don't think she's a great singer at all. I don't think the songs are that great. They're not terrible, but they seem so plastic to me. It's not fun. It's not blue collar. It's just kind of like yuppie romantic yacht music. Like I said, I don't think she's anything special of a singer. I think the lyrics and the way she does Frankie's First Affair are just awful. I do like When Am I Gonna Make a Living a little bit. It has a bit more of a pleasant note to it. Cherry Pie has a decent little groove. Clavinet on it is cool. Much better than Stevie Wonder. No, I'm dead right joking there, Joe. Don't have a conniption fit. And yeah, I just kind of feel like other than trying to be sexy and sensual, there's not a lot of emotion or storytelling in her singing. She's very one note. Sally, that song just made me absolutely laugh out loud. The way she does like her put your hands together for Sally and like an accidental, like robotic kind of tone. I think the slow stuff on here really suffers. The rhythms and grooves and the bass parts are pretty much the only saving grace. I Will Be Your Friend is somewhat decent because of this. There's also some good sax throughout it, so it's not a total lost cause. Why Can't We Live Longer has some cool keys, but there's nothing really here for me. It's my least favorite album, and I only have it at 2 stars. I think it's bad. I don't like it.
Well, that's interesting. The last one we did, Bjork, was a wide range of ratings from very low to very high, and Sade is the opposite for me. All of these are very tightly packed, very difficult for me to choose a ranking here. At the bottom for me, I am going with Lovers Rock from 2000. They say the music from when you're in high school is the stuff that you end up liking the most, but not really the case for me. Turn of the century, turn of the millennium production has just never really sat well with me, especially in the pop realm and R&B and hip hop and all that type of stuff. The production in those genres during this time, I think, is pretty lousy. And for the most part, I think Sade kind of escapes a lot of, kind of hopping around with production trends. They kind of have their sound. This is the one where it kind of feels a little dated. I like By Your Side a lot. I think that one made my song of the year list. If not, it was considered. Feels like that song in particular was maybe like a big influence on artists coming right after that, like Dido and things like that in the coming years. After that, though, on this record, I don't know. It's a little bit of a mixed bag for me. It feels very 2000 at times. The song Flow reminds me of Santana's Supernatural record from the year before. The way they use like the nylon string guitars on pretty much on this whole album just kind of reminds me of that like Maria Maria kind of sound. And then, despite it being slightly dated sounding, I do think there's still some good songs here. The vocals are pretty strong. I think it's, perfectly pleasant. So I think Sade, even at their worst, it's hard to go sub 3.5 for me. I think they're just good. I dig Somebody Already Broke My Heart. I think the title track is good, and the closer, If Only Love, It's Only Love That Gets You Through. I think that's a nice song. It's a nice, like, slow, peaceful tune to close things out. So for me, 3.5 stars at the bottom for Lovers Rock.
All right. Seems like Jason and I are gonna see eye to eye on this. Lovers Rock, also my bottom, also 3.5. And yeah, it sounds very much of the 2000s. Like you hear like a bit of R&B, like contemporary R&B influence in there. And on this one, it's sort of, I mean, they've basically gone away from the 80s sound. Like you don't get all those saxes and horns and stuff like that, like the big post-disco bass lines. This one's pretty much like a 2000s Lauryn Hill, Santana. By Your Side sounds exactly like Dido. I don't know if it was before or after Dido. It's right around the same time. Um, and that's kind of what you get with this whole album. It's a little sleepier than her other stuff, and some of the like guitar playing reminds me too much of like something you'd hear on like an NSYNC record. Like I got like those vibes. I'm just like, oh, I don't like that sound. And I'm missing some of that up-tempo-ness. But I think, Sade sounds amazing on By Your Side, especially. It's so rich and warm. She really doesn't lose anything from her vocals throughout the 25 years or so that her discography ranges. Sweetest Gift and Every Word are pretty nice. Nothing fancy, nice melodies. Everything kind of just is there to accentuate Sade's vocals. But I think what kind of suffers most on this album is just the drum machines and the beats are just a little too like elementary. It's a little adult contemporary, just not enough energy. But I don't need much more than Sade's vocals, so it's still 3.5. It's still a very pleasant listen, but definitely easy at the bottom for me.
I don't know. I have contention with your personal rankings on those. I don't think you're being true to yourselves. There's no way if this album came out this year, Jason would give it 3.5. Just absolutely no way. No way. Anyway, I'm just being troublesome. My number 5 and 5 through 2 are actually pretty tight for me. And you guys seem to like Sade a lot more than I do. I'm at 2.5 stars, which means I think it's decent for, I guess, The Soldier of Love, which is probably the hardest one for me to, because there's some stuff on it I really think is cool here, but it's such a mixed bag. Like it's maybe a top 5 mixed bag record for me we've ever covered on the channel. There's some stuff I hate. Like even in the opening track, there's some sounds I really like. Then there's that R&B whistle that I just hate. The Moon and Sky has some cool moments. You know what I'm talking about, Joe? Like that. And then like Moon and Sky has some cool stuff, but it also sounds like a bad TLC song in the same vein. Like it's just hard. The production on the album is pretty creative and it's all over the place, like kind of in a good way. Title track has some really cool hard stiffness, some electric guitar, but I hate the drums. It's got like this industrial pop metal kind of vibe that does not suit it for me. This album's just all give and take. Morning Bird is pleasant, but I don't think her vocal performance is anything for me that blows me out of the water. I don't think she's a bad singer, but I think she's pretty average. Like, if we've done 100 listographies on the channel, there's probably only 5 or 6 where I'm like, the vocals are less impressive here. Obviously, her voice has not changed much in the last 30 years because she doesn't have much of a voice to begin with. I don't know. Baby Father, I didn't like at all. I don't know why. I really hate that sweet and soapy line. And I hate the acoustic guitar. Joe's right. Like, this is like 8 years after the album she did in 2000, or 10 years after, but she's still kind of got like that early 2000s, like Madonna, Ray of Light, like acoustic guitar kind of feel, or like NSYNC or whatever. I just can't find the version of Sade that suits me. Like, her newer stuff isn't as tacky to me. And the songwriting I think is better on these, like this album, but it doesn't blow me away. I think it's just the singing I will never get behind. So Soldier of Love, I'm at 2.5, number 5.
All right, that is also my number 5. I am staying at 3.5 on this one. Some of the sounds on this record change, especially in the bass, the low end, and the program beats and stuff are different. Those kind of evolve throughout Sade's discography. The technology changes, but the way they use it doesn't really. They kind of take the new keyboard sounds and the new beats and kind of keep doing their own thing with them. So they retain their signature sound, even though the consistency of the low end changes. So this one, I like this sound a little bit more than Lovers Rock. Lead single in the title track, though, does not do it for me. Probably my least favorite song in the entire discography is Soldier of Love. I really don't like the marching snare drum beat, and the heavy guitars that they try to use just do not work at all. And then they come in with those like gang vocals at one point, and it's working against their biggest strength, which is the vocals. Moon and Sky, I think, is a decent opener. Morning Bird is pretty. Baby Father, super lame lyrics, but it is one of the catchier songs on the record. I thought for a while they were saying Daddy Knows You're a Fling, not a flame. So I was really confused about what was going on. I was like, is he dating his daughter? What's going on? I like Be That Easy a lot, kind of a breezy acoustic ballad. And I like In Another Time, I think it is really strong as well, which at its core feels like this like 50s doo-wop tune, or kind of maybe like In My Room, something like that, with those like slow arpeggiated chords, which I think is just like a really good platform for Sade's voice to kind of sit on top of. Could use a little more sax. They kind of got away from using as much sax as they did on the earlier records, or like some other kind of more interesting instrumentation than just these kind of like, vaguely hip-hop influenced R&B beats, which is fine. I don't mind that, but there needs to be other things happening around it to make it a little more interesting. And it's just a little flat overall production wise. Still enough good material, and I like her voice enough to call it a good record, but that is where I am for now, 3.5.
I like Be That Easy too, but then like you get Bring Me Home right after that, which I hate. So it's like I like it a little bit and then I hate something and it just kind of ruins it for me.
Well, I don't think I hate a single song in this discography. I didn't love as much as maybe people think, but I thought everything was pretty good. Soldier of Love is also my number 5. And it's sort of just a continuation of Lovers Rock. It's mostly the same sounds, it's mostly the same instrumentation, but I do think there's more diversity on this one in the music and what they're doing. I don't mind the military martial drums, the march of Soldier of Love. There's some questionable synth sounds in there for sure, that like some weird kind of things that they drop in, I think, to be like hip or contemporary, that I think they just kind of missed the mark. But I like her cadence and I like the vocals. A little feistier than usual. Reminds me a lot of Lauryn Hill. You got some like slow jazz on Morning Bird, very pretty. I mean, I don't really know how Cramser can't like her voice. Like, she doesn't go all over the place, but it's rich and smoky and it's just luxurious. Yeah, I mean, she doesn't have to. It just sounds great. She doesn't need to jump up in the stratosphere or anything like that. I think it's an excellent voice. Definitely the highlight of the catalog. Baby Father, I think is pretty good. Successful drum machine driven R&B, a la, Alicia Keys, something like that. And you got real romantic, Be That Easy, and a really nice waltzy old-fashioned tune in Another Time. Really pretty piano part in there. I think Sade does like that sound really well. Probably my favorite on the whole album. It's just a good album. It's not great, and I don't know if I'd return to it as like a whole piece, but it's good enough. So 3.5 for Soldier of Love.
I don't dislike her voice. Actually, I kind of do dislike it. What am I saying? I don't hate it, but I don't think there's anything special. And this might actually be a little bit of a Joe effect because I did read a lot of articles about Sade and a lot of journalist reviews and stuff, which is something I don't usually do. So I think I'm kind of like rebelling against like so much critical acclaim, like the Joe effect, where I'm like, what? Come on, like it's not that good. Like everything is like 4.5 out of 5 stars. Like every album, I'm like, come on, let's pump the brakes a little bit here.
I was very surprised to see all the Pitchfork reviews. Like they're all like over 9. Like I was just like,
Yeah.
is this the Pitchfork that I know? They're giving Diamond Life like a 9.5 or something,
Yeah,
and
come on.
that was surprising. That I wouldn't suspect or expect these albums, especially once you get into the 2000s and stuff, to be so highly rated. But
Right. I mean, it's not Rubber Soul here. Like, come on, it's Sade's fourth album. Like, let's hold off a little bit. My number 4 is going to be Stronger Than Pride. I'm still a 2.5, and spoiler alert, I don't get any higher than that. I don't like or recommend a Sade album. And that's fine. It opens with Love is Stronger Than Pride, which I think is a bit of a weird opener. It's not a terrible song, but I think it would be much better in the middle of the track list. It feels like you've been through the album by the time that comes on, and it comes on immediately. Paradise is cool. I feel like the composition of the songs really rarely go anywhere. It sounds the same throughout. Doesn't have a big emotional arc, and that's big for me. We found that out with Björk last week, and like I need a journey from start to finish. And a lot of these songs are just kind of like cool little sexy groove in the back, and she sings about being lonely or whatever the thing is. And I don't think she's a bad lyricist, and I don't think the themes of her songs are inadequate. It's really just like, I don't know, the whole vibe to me just screams like not far enough removed from like softcore porn at times, and I don't really like it. So like Nothing Can Come Between Us is pretty good. I really like the harmony there and the disco kind of jam. Haunt Me is a big breath of fresh air on this album because I feel like up until this point she hadn't really done much experimentation at all. You know, a bit of Latin guitar here, Spanish guitar. Finally feels like something a bit expansive in her catalog, and I like the mix on this album a good bit. I think the bass is a highlight for me on a lot of these albums, especially the first three. But it even is more robust here, and I feel like even here she's not quite as flat or dry in her voice, and the band plays off of that a little bit better. So I like that more than the debut. There's a bit more feeling and everything for me on this. And I think generally the album has a bit more of an edge. I never thought I'd see the day isn't as emotional as it needs to be. It just like comes with so much boredom behind it. I feel like these songs just aren't that interesting to me. I think Clean Heart is kind of cool. I like the keys and the kind of Steely Dan-esque brass. And I kind of like during this period how she's ending all of the albums with instrumentals. So yeah, 2.5. It's decent. Uh, it's not going to be my cup of tea. It's just not.
Okay, number 4 for me is also Stronger Than Pride. I'm at 3.5 still. 5 of the 10 songs here were released as singles, and all of those 5 are the first 5 songs. So if you had this on vinyl, talk about a lopsided record. Well, in terms of the singles, you're getting all the hits up front. I don't know necessarily in terms of quality if it's front loaded, because I think I agree with Cram. The title track is a weird choice of a first single and a weird choice of an album opener. Pretty slow, not very memorable. Not really sure why that was the first choice of single. Not really a major change up here, but a little bit. I think there's a little more groove to this record, a little more darkness and a little more edge to them, and maybe just a little bit more bite in the vocal delivery too. Kind of moving a little bit away from some of the jazziness of the first two records towards something a little funkier, a little more R&B ish. Nothing Can Come Between Us, Turn My Back on You, Keep Looking. All of those are songs that I think are examples of tracks with, slightly funkier grooves. I don't think the songwriting is quite as sharp, though. It feels a little bit like, let the rhythm section lay down a groove and then let's put something on top of it, and not quite as much as like starting with a good song and arranging around it. So it's a little bit more just like reliant on vibe than the first two records. Still good though, still well produced, still sounds like Sade. But I don't know, it's almost like this added intensity somehow like makes it stand out less. Like before, when they were doing like the jazzier sound, it was more their own, and here it's just like a small step, but still a step towards sounding like other people. So I don't know, I think still a good record, just not quite as good as the first two. So 3.5 for me.
All right, I'm gonna break convention here and just keep going backwards in time. Love Deluxe is gonna be my third or fourth favorite Sade album. And after all the hype over this one, I was a little disappointed with the way it turned out. I do like that they changed things up. This is far cry from Stronger Than Pride, where they kind of repeated the same template that they did on the first two albums. They added a little, Latin rhythms and maybe some reggae stuff in there. It's a little more tropical and beachy. And Love Deluxe is just completely the opposite of that. It is cold and icy. You hear some of like the Massive Attack, trip hop, especially right off the bat on No Ordinary Love. It's just more of an urban, that neo soul sound as well. Very 90s. You got some tempestuous guitar that kind of cuts in throughout the song, which is pretty cool. And it's a great sound. Like, I really think if they had doubled down on that sound, this could have been a great album. But I don't think the rest of the album kind of copies that enough for me. And it kind of gets into, I don't know, just a little bit too boring. It's just a little, it's like this album's like bloodless and lifeless, and it just kind of grooves, and it's not the same, kind of up-tempo, fun 80s groove of Stronger Than Pride. It's kind of like that down-tempo groove. The bass is a little tuned down too far for me. And everything it's just a little like ethereal and weightless. I think they had the right idea, especially going with more guitars. Like a Tattoo has some really nice acoustics on it, and Cherish the Day has some more of that like electric guitar power. Really nice vocal part from Sade. Her stuff, of course, is great throughout. She sounds great. She adapts to this new style perfectly. I don't love how kind of loose and loungy and weightless this all feels to me. And it makes me miss those really good 80s bass grooves. So I don't know. I think this is a good album with some good moments, but doesn't hold up throughout the listening experience. I think it, other than maybe the singles, there's not a lot there, and kind of falls off at the end with Bulletproof Soul and Mermaid. So 3.5 stars. But I imagine this will be Cramser's favorite.
Maybe. My number 3 is Lovers Rock. This was a tough one to put at number 3, because I kind of feel the same way about it as Jason does, where I think at times it might have some of the best songwriting in her catalog, but the production and the performance just isn't there. Like, I think this is the album you're talking about where like there's like interesting stuff, but it needs more stuff going on around it, especially in the percussion section. But like By Your Side might be the best written song she has. but it also doesn't really feel like her at the same time. Like it feels like her just trying to come up with like a 2000s pop hit, and it's like really impressive. And yeah, I mean, how many times have we talked about it? That early 2000s production, just can't stand it. The drums and the bass, getting that Dido flair in there. And yeah, I mean, By Your Side is great. Flow isn't too bad. It's just like I think if I saw this album done unplugged, I'd be impressed with it. But just for a listening experience, it really is injured. But the songs aren't that bad. And a lot of it is still kind of not too far removed from her works prior, but it's just the sound. And I think it suffers from all being way too mid-tempo. And I think you can make that critique with all of her albums. There's not enough dynamic, there's not enough variety in how it pulsates your body and how it illuminates your mind. The way you feel about the album 2.5 minutes in is the same way you feel about it 35 minutes in. It does not really take you on a ride. It lacks power, it's not very bold. And a lot of times her music just feels like background noise to me. Um, there's some nice little guitar work. There's some bad little guitar work. I think Slave Song has some really cool reggae influence. Title track is strong. Good songs. Just, I think this album could be reworked and become something special. But who's going to do it? Not me or you guys. So.
All right. Number 3 for me is the debut, Diamond Life. And like Cram, I am not a fan of Smooth Operator. I remember it was a commercial on a TV commercial for like an easy listening radio station in the 90s. I remember it coming on like in the mornings when I was watching TV before school and hearing it and not knowing what it was really, but always like making fun of it, being like, singing it at recess or whatever, because I thought it sounded so ridiculous as a kid. And I've just never been able to shake that association. Probably my bottom 2 Sade songs, probably the only other one I really don't like besides Soldier of Love. Overall, though, the rest of the album I think is solid. I think the production is nice and slick. It's really, really timeless sounding. It's hard to place like when this record is from. And I don't think 1984 would be my first guess if I was guessing without any knowledge of this band. It could be the 70s, it could be the 90s. It's kind of hard to pinpoint. Your Love Is King was the lead single, though, actually, not Smooth Operator, which I believe was the third single. And to me, Your Love Is King is the standout track. I think it's a really good, catchy tune. Sade's voice is great, pretty much all over the record. And I really like Stuart Matthewman's sax and some of the trumpets that join in from time to time are really cool. I love the way the percussion is mixed on this record. I Will Be Your Friend has those like, I don't know if it's bongos or congas, but it has that hand percussion replacing the snare. And I think it works really well. It's really prominent on a lot of tracks. And I think it gives the record a nice, unique flavor. Frankie's First Affair, I think, is another really strong track, kind of a character study. I like the sax solo on that one a lot too. One complaint I would have about this record, though, and maybe why it doesn't, isn't top 2, would be that everything feels a little too separated and it doesn't feel very live. It feels like everything was like either overly isolated in tracking or tracked separately completely. It has a little bit of a fake synthetic sound, and I think that's actually corrected on the next record. Even though the next record sounds very similar, I think it does have a more live feel. So for my taste, just a little sterile, but it still does sound really good. Her voice is great, and I think the songs are strong. So 3.5 stars for Diamond Life.
All right. Well, we're still cruising in this 3.5, 4-star range, me and Jason. I'm going to jump up to 4, though. We're Stronger Than Pride, my number 3. And this one, yeah, I forget which one of you said it. It's just all about the groove on this. It's just insistent throughout. And you want to just get in there. It's more of, I don't know if this is like her fun record. And it doesn't start out that way because Love Is Stronger Than Pride is the sleepiest track on the whole album, one of the sleepiest in her whole discography. It's really bizarre. One of you said this, just the worst possible track to kick this album off. But then 4 minutes and 16 seconds later, it gets much, much better with Paradise. Such a strong groove. Same with Nothing Can Come Between Us. Just it's kind of music that just like locks in to the bass and the drums, and Sade's great vocals. And that's kind of all you need. And I think it carries it enough throughout this whole album. A lot of longer songs, 4, 5, 6 minutes. And they add a little bit of a Latin flavor to it. Got some maybe reggae, like it's a little beachy. It's a little dancey still. It's a little less Quiet Storm, I think, which they really nailed on the first two albums. And this goes away from that a little bit. It's a little more up tempo, I think, and vibrant, I'd say, a little less reliant on the saxophone. And I think it's not a big change of direction, but it's a new-ish direction, and that's enough. I think Diamond Life and Promise were pretty much the same side of the same coin. And this is definitely different. It's a chance to break out and branch out a little bit. Like this is Sade we're talking about. So it's not like some massive change of direction, U-turn, 180, whatever. But I think there's enough there. It's fun. It sounds great still. She sounds great. Such a great voice. Just an amazing voice she has. So I'm going to go 4 stars. So all her 80s albums for me, 4 stars at least.
All right. My number 2, and like I said, still at 2.5. Got Promise from 1985. And I think Jason's right. Like, it had a very mannequin plastic kind of sound on the debut, and a lot of that does get corrected on the follow-up. It's got a much brighter sound. The drums particularly feel like there's actually a drummer back there. Like the cymbals have like this crystalline kind of quality. Like you can feel and hear when they're getting hit hard, when they're getting softened up, and they're a little bit more dominant in the mix. Like everything about that is better. But I think the lead-off track, like Crime, Is It a Crime, is quite dull. There's just not a lot of excitement on this album, not a lot of depth. But I don't think it has very many low points, which is why it's hovering around 2.5. The Sweetest Taboo is okay. Almost has like a MJ kind of thriller feel. The bass is cool. That little lead guitar part is cool. I think War of Hearts is great, actually. The percussion loop in the background is really nice. The piano is just lovely. And unlike the first album, where I think the slower stuff is kind of a detriment, I think that it works much better here. Like You're Not the Man is a really nice, steamy lounge jazz kind of number. I think she's kind of sinking into the performances better here on these slower kind of sensual songs. Jezebel, really cool sax. And like I was saying before, like I haven't found my sweet spot for Sade, because like I think the songwriting's better in her later half, but like some of the stuff, like I like the sax and the bass in the early stuff. And I think Jason's right. They kind of abandon the sax later on, and I think it's needed. Mr. Wrong has some cool bass. Really, the drums are cool as well. But I just still think it's generally kind of tacky and full of like pseudo self-empowerment, romantic troubles that are worthy really only of soap operas and don't really get into the nitty-gritty of the details. Punch Drunk, piano's really nice for sure. I think Fear is over the top, and I don't really like the sounds on Tar Baby. It's decent, has good moments, but still just decent. 2.5 for me.
All right, my number 2 is Love Deluxe. So on this record, you immediately notice a different sound after 3 records that sound pretty similar. This is the first one where you get the first kind of like production shakeup. You get that big fat 90s low end sound. And I actually really like the fuller sound for them. There's something about the way that her voice is able to like sit on top of that I think is really cool. I like No Ordinary Love a lot, but I don't love the rock guitars. Again, I mentioned that on one of the later records too. The guitar tones that they use when they're trying to do like a heavier guitar sound does not work, I don't think. But her vocals are fantastic on that track. I think it's a pretty good song otherwise. I Couldn't Love You More, I think it is a strong tune. Like a Tattoo, I think is really good, kind of understated. just have like a little bed of synth on there. Acoustic guitar and voice really shows off her excellent tone. I love the vibe on Cherish the Day, that minimal beat and the spacey synths. So I think there's like a quiet confidence on this record. They seem very comfortable letting the vocals do the heavy lifting here. Musically, the band is just kind of hanging back and doing as little as possible. And I think it's a nice kind of like subtle updating of their sound. It sounds like a 90s record now. It sounds modern and contemporary, but it didn't really shake up their sound all that much. So I think it just kind of works. I think it's pretty strong. Still at 3.5, but a stronger 3.5.
Will Jason go 3.5 for the entire discography? That is the question. That would be a first, I think. My number 2, Diamond Life, the debut, 1984. I didn't think I liked Smooth Operator, but I do. I really do. I think it's a great song. I always thought it was kind of corny and cheesy, but listening to the whole thing and gathering, soaking it all in, I actually think it's a pretty cool song with some good lyrics and it's a little more biting than I thought. She's kind of just trashing this dude. So I think that's good. You start out with her vocals and they're very smooth, and she's a really lovely low mid-range. There's like a little sand to it though. It's not like perfect, which I like. And she doesn't jump around. It's a big change up from last week when we did Bjork. Very just sort of like effortless sounding, which is cool. So Smooth Operator, better than I expected. I actually don't like Your Love Is King. I think that's one of my least favorite in her whole discography. It's way too adult contemporary. It's way too smooth. The horn part that kicks it off is like neutered Steely Dan, and lyrics a little too gushy. It's like a 2 if it didn't have Sade and vocals, but with her, it's like a 3.5. Hang On to Your Love, though, is great. You got that really funky, omnipresent bass line that's like a small step down from Billie Jean, and its head bobbing drive, and the drums and guitar all work together really well. Just sexy, smooth funk. That's really cool. It's a little extra embellishment. Although it does, like, as soon as I heard that song, I was like, I gotta listen to Michael Jackson. And that's kind of like the biggest critique I have with her catalog is like it makes me want to listen to a master of this, like Michael Jackson. But I like this. I like Quiet Storm, and I think this is very good Quiet Storm. Frankie's First Affair is very good Quiet Storm, I think. I think Sade has a little damage in her vocals, which he expresses very well throughout the song. Some really great leads in Cherry Pie, that funky staccato wah guitar, great bass line, just a good groove. Sally's good. I like Sade's vocals a lot. She kind of dips, gets a little husky, a little low register, slow, seductive. My biggest problem usually with these 80s albums is the sax work is just too, I don't know, it's like John Tesh, Yanni. Like I want a little dirtier, like a little more exciting, a little too smooth. And it just makes me want to listen to like better sax when I hear it. But Sade, she saves the day with her vocals, and I think Cam's just dissing her lyrics, but I think her lyrics are pretty darn good, especially once you get to the next album. But I think they're brainier and more interesting on here than you would think. So I think it's a good album, 4 stars, and it's very smooth, yes, but I think they pull it off really well, and I think it's one of the better examples of this style that you will find.
Check the tape, brother. Check the tape. I said her lyrics are fine, and I highlighted one song I didn't like the lyrics. Anyway, in an effort to get people to watch the entire video, I lied. I do have a 3-star album. It's my number 1. It is Love Deluxe. I think it's a good album, and I think it's her most poetic album. I think it's artistic. I think it's cool in a way where it doesn't really have a lot of standout tracks. I think it's a total album experience, and This is the album that kind of like broke up the timeline here. And it is icy, it is cool, it is desolate, it is really introspective, you know, and it leads off with No Ordinary Love, getting a bit back into like more kind of the one note smooth sex jazz thing. And like I get into this album and I'm like, okay, like she's going back to like, you know, the debut kind of stuff. But that's not the case, whatever. It's like introducing you to this whole kind of like thematic analogy that she has on love. And it starts with that, which actually is a great opener for what the album is about. Then you get into Feel No Pain, and then you're like, okay, this album's about something different. Redeems itself quite a bit, has a bit of a deeper side about self kind of like medicating and being in a bit of a dark place. I think Like a Tattoo is really cool, kind of bare and haunting and ghostly. I think in a way this is easily her darkest and most like reclusive album. It seems to be less seductive and way more internalized with like pain and a little bit of depression. Like a lot of people were saying like after this album, like she got really depressed and all that. Even Kiss of Life, which kind of has like a more upbeat, kind of poppy, melodic piano part and like more like, you know, positive, sunny kind of nature. I don't think it's quite all smiles and stuff. I like the vibe of Cherish the Day. Pearls is really kind of nice and soothing. It has like this beautiful kind of wash up on a beach kind of feel. Bulletproof Soul, I think, is one of her better steamy, sultry tracks. And like I said, the songs themselves aren't like craving radio attention. They don't have a lot of R&B focus. They're a lot more atmospheric and with full of like serenity and more at peace. It's weird because I feel like this album is more at peace, but at the same time, she's kind of dealing with a lot more like disturbing kind of features and thematics. But overall, like the composure and the darkness of it just gives me like probably the best album experience start to finish. I think Mermaid is really beautiful, continuing the tradition of ending with like instrumentals, just like this really nice tapestry. Kind of reminds you of like a mid 90s Moby track. But yeah, I liked it. 3 stars. Sorry if you didn't, you know, watch past halfway point where I said I don't go beyond 2.5, but I do. There was a Sade album that I like.
Okay, my number one, and I am not going up to 4 stars. I have the entire catalog at 3.5. I think every record is good. I don't think any of them are very good. So, my number one is Promise. This was a number one album in the US and the UK. Same production team as the debut. I think this, like I said, I think this record sounds a little bit better than Diamond Life, simply for the fact that it sounds a little bit more like a live band. The sounds kind of just blend together a little more like they're in the same room together. Is It a Crime and Sweetest Taboo, I think both strong singles, both would have fit in pretty easily on Diamond Life. But then after that, you do get into some slightly different territory with songs like War of the Hearts, which is really sparse, and you know it doesn't even really feel very much like R&B, really leaning a lot more on the jazz influences. You're Not the Man, again, very jazzy, feels a little singer-songwritery too, a little loungy jazz type of thing, which I like. Great breathy vocals on Jezebel, which I think sound great. I love the instrumental section on that song as well, with the electric piano and sax kind of like trading lines back and forth a little bit, almost in conversation with one another. I like the keyboard sounds a lot on this album too. They're pretty cheesy and like super of their time, but it feels like a sound that I just grew up hearing a lot, and I just like the sound of it. I don't know exactly what they remind me of, but they remind me of something. I dig the closer Maureen, which feels like a real tribute to Motown. Still has the Sade sound, but you know the groove is like a Motown groove. So there's a lot here that I like. I like the voice. I like a bunch of the songs. Sade, I enjoy it. I can put on any of these records and be perfectly happy. I just don't get that excited about it, and I probably won't come back to them very often. So there you go.
Well, Promise is my favorite too. And I'm trying to decide if I want to go above 4 stars. I'm not going to. So we're sticking with 4, peaking with 4 for Sade. It's right on the edge for me. I think it's a really good sounding album. I agree with Jason. It's better sounding than Diamond Life. It's a little more alive. Diamond Life kind of sounds like just purely studio creation, and this doesn't. Like this feels vibrant a little. It's the mid 80s, so it's not like live in studio or anything. But Jason said it well when he said more of a live band feel. Definitely. Is It a Crime? Kind of starts out with Diamond Life finished, got those big soft rock horns, uh, yacht rock even. I think the music, it's maybe a little more complex, a little more interesting. A hint of post disco in the bass, nice little sax solo. This one introduces some more organ and that just little shimmer from the organ. I think goes a really long way. And Sade's vocals, I think, have a little more range. She gets a little more in different emotions, a little louder, not quite like angry, but maybe steamed. She gets a little steamed on this, and her voice loses a little bit smoothness, which is nice. She's not always perfectly smooth. Sweetest Taboo, another winner, kicking bass line. I really just love the way Sade sings this. The vocal parts kind of cascading and kind of bouncing off of themselves, luscious, sexy. War of the Hearts, jazzy, sparse. Just another one where it really just everything is built to accentuate what Sade is doing with her vocals, and they're just effortless. The one probably I don't love the instrumental. Like that's really when you hear like this without Sade would be like a mid-level like yacht rock band probably. And you really need her to like bring that soul. Not that they're bad players. I just don't find them that interesting. Even the sax stuff, which I should love, I find it a little one note and a little plain and a little too slick, probably. But once Sade gets back into it and you get the grooves back on Never As Good As the First Time, dancey. I think it's dancey. I don't say that about too many of these songs, but that one's dancey. And Fear's good. Tar Baby's great. I really like the lyrics, really exploring that idea. And then I don't think you could make a song called Tar Baby today. I think it's a slur, but she can pull it off. And Marine's a great ending track. So I think this is probably her best lyrical album, her best vocal album, and just that little extra organ, a little more exploration than the Quiet Storm sounds. I think puts it above Diamond Life for me. So it's strong 4 stars for me for Promise from 1985. Maybe another one to throw in my mix for top 5 in that terrible year.
There's no way that album is a top 5 album in 1985.
So hopefully I try to have like a narrative arc to the video where as I talk about them, it sounds like I'm liking them more and more and more. But the degree to which I like my number 1 to my number 6 here is minuscule. Like I know a lot of people in our community kind of have a conversion between their stars in the 10-point system with a decimal. There might be a 0.2 difference between my number 6 and my number 1. I feel like they're almost identical records aside from a few little production things. So
Well, they're definitely not even close to being identical records. You may like them identically,
yes,
but they're
they're
pretty
pretty similar.
different. I don't think people
they're
would.
not.
You
They're
don't
not
think
pretty. No,
you
they're
don't think Diamond Life is different than Love Deluxe?
the production is different, but the impact of them is not different. With her voice on top and the songwriting style, I don't think the songwriting evolves a ton.
None of these songs are as good as Identikit by Radiohead, and that's all I'm thinking about right now. Let's just do a Radiohead remaster because it'd be far more interesting than this.
Radiohead's a better band, but I'm pretty sick of Radiohead, and you constantly bring them up for everything. Come on. Why would you even be thinking about Radiohead right now?
Because, well, we'll get to it later. Because I get to go to Pitchfork in a few months and see the smile. That's why.
All right, everyone, let us know what you think of Sade, what you think of our list, and what your own list is. drop it down in the comments. Make sure you hit the bell for notifications. Make sure you're subscribed, hit the like button, all that stuff. Check the video description, especially the link to Patreon down there. Check that out. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.